Welcome to Learn English Through Videos, where history becomes a powerful way to improve your English. Today, we begin a journey into the past, a story filled with dreams, pain, ambition, and consequences. It's the story of a man whose name still echoes through history books and conversations, a name that sparks controversy, debate, and deep reflection. Adolf Hitler. No matter what you think of him, Hitler's life was one of the most dramatic and world-changing tales of the 20th century. From a quiet boy with artistic dreams to a powerful dictator who led his country into one of the darkest times in human history, his story is full of lessons, not just about history, but about choices, leadership, failure, and human nature. This is not just a history lesson. It's a chance for you to practice English listening, learn new words, and understand real stories in simple, clear English. Our goal is to help you grow your vocabulary, improve your pronunciation, and stay engaged with meaningful content. So as you follow along, don't just focus on the facts. Listen to how the words sound, how the sentences are built, and how emotions are expressed in English. Whether you're a beginner or intermediate learner, this video will challenge your listening skills and inspire you to think critically about history. Put on your headphones, find a quiet place, and get ready to dive into a story that changed the world. This is the life of Adolf Hitler, told like you've never heard before, through clear English, spoken slowly and thoughtfully, just for you. Let's begin. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small town called Braunau am Inn in Austria. He was the fourth of 6 children born to Alois and Clara Hitler, though only Adolf and one sibling survived into adulthood. From the outside, his childhood seemed like any other, but inside the walls of his home, life was complicated. His father, Alois, was a strict man. He worked as a customs official and believed in discipline, hard work, and following rules. He had big plans for his son. He wanted Adolf to study hard, get a secure government job, and live a stable life. But young Adolf had very different dreams. He didn't want to work in an office or wear a uniform. He loved art. He would often sit for hours drawing buildings, animals, and people. His imagination was big, and his desire to become a famous painter was even bigger. Adolf's mother, Clara, was gentle and loving. She supported her son's artistic dreams and encouraged his creativity. She was his safe space in a world that often felt harsh. But Clara's support wasn't enough to protect him from his father's disapproval. When Adolf talked about becoming an artist, Alois would shout, "Art is not a real job." These moments left Adolf silent, often hiding his tears and sketching alone in his room. At school, Adolf showed signs of intelligence, but lacked motivation. Teachers would often say, "He is smart, but he doesn't try." He enjoyed history and drawing, but he had little interest in other subjects. His school reports reflected this: average marks, poor behavior, and a strong sense of pride that often led to trouble. When Adolf was 13 years old, his father died suddenly. Some thought he might feel relief, finally free to follow his passion. But instead, the loss left a hole in his heart. He became more distant, more stubborn, and less interested in school. Slowly, his dream of becoming a great artist became the one thing he clung to. It was more than a hobby. It was his escape. This was the beginning of a young boy's struggle between hope and reality. A dreamer in a world that didn't understand his dreams. After finishing school, Adolf was ready to chase his dream. He packed his bags and moved to Vienna, Austria. He believed this beautiful city, full of music, art, and grand buildings, would welcome him with open arms. "This is it," he thought. "Vienna will be the place where I become a great artist." He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts, one of the most respected art schools in the country. He was excited, full of hope. But when the results came, his heart sunk. He was rejected. The school said his drawings were not good enough. Adolf couldn't believe it. He felt hurt, embarrassed, and angry. "I will try again," he said. The next year, he applied once more. And again, he was rejected. This second rejection crushed him. Without school, without a job, and far from home, his life quickly became difficult. He lived in small, dirty rooms and sometimes had to sleep on benches or in shelters. He wore old clothes and barely had enough money for food. He painted small postcards and tried to sell them to tourists for coins, but it was never enough. Day after day, he walked the streets of Vienna, hungry and alone. During this time, his mother, Clara, became very sick. Even though they were apart, Adolf loved her deeply. When he returned to care for her, it was already too late.
She died from cancer, and Adolf was devastated. She had been the only person who truly believed in him. Her death left him feeling completely alone in the world. His sadness soon turned into anger. Instead of blaming himself for his failures, he began blaming others. He started to believe that certain people were responsible for his pain, especially those who looked or thought differently than him. These early ideas of hate and blame began to grow inside him, quietly shaping his thoughts. Vienna, the city of dreams, had become the city of rejection, poverty, and bitterness. What began as a hopeful journey to become an artist ended with disappointment and darkness. This painful period in Adolf's life would later influence many of the choices he made and the dangerous path he would soon take. In 1914, the world changed forever. World War I began, and millions of men across Europe rushed to join their country's armies. For Adolf, this was the chance he had been waiting for, a way to escape his painful past and become part of something bigger than himself. He moved to Germany and quickly volunteered to fight for the German army. Though he was not German by birth, he felt a strong connection to the country and believed in its cause. As a soldier, Adolf found new purpose. He was brave, loyal, and proud to wear the uniform. He served as a messenger on the front lines, carrying important information across dangerous battlefields. The job was risky, but Adolf never hesitated. He believed he had finally found his place in the world. During the war, he was wounded twice and received 2 medals for bravery. For the first time in his life, he felt respected and needed. But in 1918, everything fell apart. Germany lost the war. The country was forced to sign a peace agreement that many Germans saw as unfair and humiliating. The Treaty of Versailles demanded that Germany take full responsibility for the war and pay massive amounts of money to other nations. Many Germans, including Adolf, felt betrayed. They believed their leaders had given up too easily and that the country had been stabbed in the back. For Adolf, the defeat was personal. He couldn't understand how everything he had fought for was gone. He returned to a country that was no longer proud and strong, but weak, poor, and angry. The streets were filled with hunger, protests, and fear. People had lost hope, and Adolf was one of them. But instead of moving on, he held on to his anger. He believed someone had to be blamed for Germany's suffering. Slowly, the idea grew in his mind that Germany didn't just lose the war, it was betrayed from within. These thoughts stayed with him and continued to grow stronger. The war had ended, but for Adolf Hitler, a new battle was just beginning, one inside his heart, shaped by hate, disappointment, and the desire for revenge. After the war, Germany was broken. Cities were damaged, the economy was in ruins, and people were filled with sadness and frustration. Soldiers came home not as heroes, but as reminders of a painful loss. Adolf Hitler was one of them. He had no job, no family, and no clear future. But deep inside, he carried a powerful mix of emotions: anger, pride, and a growing belief that Germany deserved more.
Adolf stayed in the army for a short time after the war, working in a small job gathering information about political groups. It was during this time that he attended a meeting of a small, unknown group called the German Workers' Party. They had only a few members and met in beer halls to talk about their ideas. But when Adolf stood up and spoke for the first time, something changed. His voice was full of emotion. His words were simple but strong. The people in the room were shocked. Who is this man, they wondered. Even with no training as a speaker, Adolf had something powerful, a way of speaking that made people listen. The leaders of the group quickly asked him to join. He agreed, and from that moment, Adolf Hitler began his journey into politics. He studied public speaking, read books about leadership, and practiced his message. He blamed certain groups of people for Germany's problems. He said the government was weak, the peace treaty was unfair, and that Germany had been tricked. These were the words many Germans wanted to hear. Over time, Adolf took more control of the group. He changed its name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party. He gave the party a new symbol, a red flag with a black swastika in the center. He believed symbols had power. He said, "This will be the most feared and respected sign in the world." Slowly, the party grew. People came to hear Adolf speak. His speeches were full of fire and passion. He promised to make Germany strong again. He spoke of unity, of pride, and of a great future. His voice echoed in halls filled with desperate people who had lost everything. But his ideas were not just about pride. They were also filled with hate.
Adolf believed that only pure Germans deserved to live in the country. He blamed Jewish people and other minorities for Germany's problems. He spoke of removing them to make the country clean again. These dangerous ideas started to spread. In 1923, Adolf decided to take action. He tried to lead a group of his followers to take over the government in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He believed the people would rise up and support him, but he was wrong. The plan failed. The police stopped the march, and Adolf was arrested. Many thought this would be the end of his political career. Instead, it was just the beginning. Adolf was sent to prison for 9 months. During that time, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. In the book, he shared his beliefs about Germany's future, his hatred for Jews, and his dream of a pure, powerful nation. The book became popular, especially among people who were angry and looking for someone to blame. It gave Adolf something even more powerful than speeches. It gave him a written voice that could spread across the country. When he was released from prison, Adolf returned to the Nazi Party and began rebuilding it, this time with more strategy. He focused on gaining power legally, through elections and propaganda. He used the radio, newspapers, posters, and big rallies to spread his message. He knew how to use fear and hope to win people's hearts. By the late 1920s, the Nazi Party had become one of the most powerful political groups in Germany. The country was still suffering. The Great Depression had arrived. Banks failed, jobs disappeared, and people stood in long lines for food. In these dark times, Adolf's promises seemed bright. "Germany will rise again," he shouted, and the people believed him. He was no longer just a failed artist or a lost soldier. Adolf Hitler had become a symbol of strength, pride, and something new. The man who once sold postcards on the streets of Vienna was now on his way to becoming the most powerful man in Germany. By the early 1930s, Germany was in deep crisis. The economy had collapsed, millions of people were unemployed, and families struggled just to buy bread. People were desperate for change. In this chaos, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party continued to grow. Their message was loud and clear: Germany can be strong again. Hitler promised jobs, order, and national pride. He told the people what they wanted to hear, and many believed him. In 1932, Hitler ran for president but lost. Still, his popularity continued to rise. He was not a joke anymore. He was a real threat to the old political system. Powerful businessmen, military leaders, and politicians began to take notice. They thought they could control him, use his popularity for their own goals. They believed that if they gave him power, he would follow their lead. On January 30, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, the highest position in the government. It was a moment that changed history. People cheered in the streets. Many believed that Hitler would save the country. Factories would reopen, jobs would return, and Germany would rise from its knees. For the first time in years, hope returned to the eyes of the German people. Once in power, Hitler moved quickly. He passed new laws to give himself more control. He silenced his political enemies, shut down opposition parties, and took control of the police. The media was no longer free. Newspapers, radio, and even schools began to spread Nazi ideas. Children were taught to follow Hitler, and those who disagreed were made to disappear. Germany changed rapidly. New roads, factories, and public works projects gave people jobs and improved daily life. Crowds cheered, and many Germans began to call Hitler a hero. But behind the progress was a dark truth. Freedom was disappearing. People were watched, questioned, and feared. The country looked stronger on the outside, but inside, fear was growing. Adolf Hitler had gone from a failed artist to the most powerful man in Germany. But this was only the beginning. His plans for Germany, and for the world, were just getting started. In 1939, Adolf Hitler made a bold move. He ordered the German army to invade Poland. Tanks rolled in, planes flew overhead, and soldiers marched across the border. This attack shocked the world. Just days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. At first, Hitler's army seemed unstoppable. They used a fast and powerful method of fighting called blitzkrieg, or lightning war. In a short time, Germany took control of Poland, then Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. City after city fell. Hitler stood before cheering crowds, smiling and waving. He believed nothing could stop him. Germany was stronger than ever, and the world was watching in fear. But Hitler's plans were not just about land and power.
He had darker ideas, ideas that would lead to one of the greatest tragedies in human history. Deep in his mind, he believed that certain people did not belong in Germany. He hated the Jewish people, blaming them for Germany's problems. He also targeted Roma people, disabled individuals, and others he saw as different. These dangerous thoughts turned into terrible actions. As Germany conquered more land, Hitler began to put his plan into motion. Jewish people were taken from their homes and sent to ghettos, crowded, dirty parts of cities where they were forced to live in fear and hunger. From there, many were sent to concentration camps. These were not just prisons. They were places of death. In these camps, people were starved, forced to work until they collapsed, or killed in gas chambers. The goal was not punishment. It was total removal. This horrific plan was called the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jewish people were murdered, along with millions of others. Families were torn apart. Children died beside their parents. Whole communities disappeared. The world would not learn the full truth until years later, when the war was nearly over. By then, it was too late to save the lives that had already been taken. As Hitler continued to expand his empire, he grew more confident. In 1941, he made another risky decision. He invaded the Soviet Union, even though it was one of the largest and most powerful countries in the world. At first, German forces pushed deep into Russian territory, but the winter was brutal. and Soviet resistance was strong. Slowly, Germany began to lose ground. At the same time, the United States entered the war after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Now Germany was fighting powerful enemies on multiple fronts, the Soviets in the east and the Americans and British in the west. The war that once looked like an easy victory was now a global struggle. Despite this, Hitler refused to give up. He gave long speeches, shouting that Germany would never surrender. He sent more troops, built more weapons, and ordered more attacks. But things were falling apart. Bombs rained down on German cities. Factories were destroyed. Homes were turned to rubble. The people who once cheered for Hitler now stood in silence, scared and uncertain. Behind closed doors, Hitler became more paranoid. He no longer trusted his generals. He gave strange orders and refused to face the truth. His speeches grew darker. He blamed everyone but himself. Even as his armies were pushed back, he still believed he could win. But by 1944, the truth was clear. Germany was losing. Allied forces landed in France and began to push across Europe. The Soviet army moved in from the east, taking city after city. Hitler's dream of controlling all of Europe was dying. Even in these final moments, Hitler never showed regret. He continued to speak of victory, even as bombs fell around him. He spent his last months hiding in a bunker beneath the city of Berlin, protected by concrete walls and guarded by his most loyal followers. But nothing could protect him from the end that was coming. The Holocaust continued until the very last days of the war. Even when defeat was near, the killing did not stop. The Nazis destroyed records and burned bodies, trying to hide what they had done. But the truth could not be hidden forever. When the Allied forces reached the camps, they were shocked by what they found: rooms filled with shoes, hair, glasses, and the bodies of innocent people. World War II, which began with one man's ambition, had become a nightmare for millions. Hitler's desire for power had destroyed cities, ended lives, and left deep scars on the world. By the time it was over, more than 70 million people had died: soldiers, civilians, children. The Holocaust remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. It was not just a war of bombs and bullets, but a war against humanity itself. Adolf Hitler had turned fear into hate, and hate into action. His voice, once cheered by crowds, became a symbol of death and destruction. The dream he promised was a lie, and the price was paid in blood. By the end of 1944, Adolf Hitler's dream of a powerful German empire was falling apart. The army that once seemed unstoppable was now losing battles across Europe. From the east, the Soviet Union pushed the German forces back with overwhelming strength. From the west, American and British troops advanced through France and into Germany. City after city was bombed, buildings collapsed, streets burned, and millions of people ran for their lives. The war that Hitler had started was now coming home. Inside Germany, the people were no longer cheering. They were afraid. Families hid in basements as bombs fell. Food was scarce, homes were destroyed, and the streets were filled with smoke and silence. The same man who had once promised greatness now brought only fear and destruction. Still, Hitler refused to surrender. He believed that giving up would be a sign of weakness.
If Germany loses, he said coldly, it is because the people were not strong enough. By early 1945, Hitler rarely appeared in public. He spent his days deep underground in a bunker beneath the city of Berlin. The bunker was cold, dark, and quiet, protected by thick walls of concrete.
Inside, Hitler sat with his most loyal followers, giving desperate orders and reading reports filled with bad news. Above them, Berlin was being torn apart by Soviet forces. The end was near, and everyone knew it. Even in these final days, Hitler remained with Eva Braun, the woman who had been by his side for many years. She had stayed loyal to him, even as the world around them collapsed. On April 29, 1945, with bombs shaking the ground above, Adolf and Eva remarried in the bunker. It was a small ceremony, quiet and strange. There were no celebrations, no music, just a few people standing in silence. After the wedding, they spent time together, talking about their lives and everything that had happened. The next day, April 30th, 1945, Hitler made his final decision. He gathered his closest followers and told them he would not be captured alive. He believed that death was better than defeat. With Eva by his side, he entered a small room in the bunker. Moments later, the sound of gunfire echoed through the underground halls. Hitler and Eva had taken their own lives. When Soviet soldiers reached the bunker, they found the bodies of Adolf and Eva. Soon after, Germany officially surrendered on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. The country that had once followed Hitler with cheers and hope was left in ruins, its cities destroyed, its people broken, and its future uncertain. For many Germans, there was confusion, sadness, and shame. How did this happen, they asked. How did we let one man lead us into such darkness? The answers were painful, and the wounds ran deep. Adolf Hitler died at the age of 56, but the impact of his actions would last for generations. His rise and fall became a warning to the world, a reminder of what can happen when fear replaces reason, when hate replaces love, and when power is placed in the wrong hands. The story of Adolf Hitler is not an easy one to tell. It is filled with pain, darkness, and decisions that change the world in the worst possible way. But it is a story that must be told, not to glorify the man, but to learn from the mistakes of the past. His life teaches us what can happen when hatred is allowed to grow, when ambition turns to obsession, and when people stop questioning those in power. Adolf Hitler started as a boy with big dreams. He wanted to be an artist, to create beauty. But life did not go the way he had hoped. Instead of turning failure into growth, he chose anger. He blamed others for his problems, and over time, those small thoughts of bitterness became dangerous beliefs. Those beliefs became words, and those words became actions that destroyed millions of lives. History is full of lessons, and this story is one of the most powerful. It shows us that every choice matters. One man's decisions led to a war that covered the globe, to suffering that touched nearly every family in Europe, and to the loss of innocent lives in numbers too large to fully understand. We must remember that hatred doesn't begin with violence. It begins with small ideas that seem harmless at first, but when fed with fear and anger, can grow into something terrible. But there is also hope in this story. After the war, the world came together to rebuild. Germany became a peaceful nation. Countries formed alliances to protect each other. Laws were written to prevent future crimes against humanity. Survivors of the Holocaust told their stories so that the world would never forget, and people everywhere learned the value of freedom, compassion, and human dignity. For English learners, stories like this are more than just history lessons. They are opportunities to grow, not just in language, but in understanding. Listening to real stories told in clear and simple English helps us connect with the world in a deeper way. You're not just learning words and grammar, you're learning how to think critically, how to feel empathy, and how to see life from many points of view. As you move forward, remember the lessons from this story. Choose love over hate. Choose peace over violence. Choose understanding over judgment. Because every action, no matter how small, shapes the future we live in. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history and language. If this video helped you learn something new, please like, share, and subscribe to Learn English through videos. Together, we can continue learning through powerful stories that teach us both English and life. See you in the next story.